It starts with the T's insta-smoking window and throwing a top-mid smoke, which allows the T's to safely cross the mid boxes without the CTs being able to see them. This causes the CTs to counter-molly the top boxes to prevent the T's from getting into a power position, and the T's will then molly bottom connector to prevent the CTs from getting aggressive towards mid or underpass, leading the CTs to smoke out bottom connector to extinguish the molly while simultaneously opening up their options for getting aggressive. But 9 times out of 10, this setup just leaves the T's waiting in top mid for CT aggression and the CTs waiting in jungle connector for T aggression, and the game just stalls. And that's all I have for you guys today. Let me know if I missed. Okay, I'll explain more. Psst, hey kid. This video is sponsored by SkinsMonkey. SkinsMonkey is a 24/7 online trading service for CS2 that is extremely easy to use. You just select your skins that you want to trade, the skins that you want to trade for, and they'll send you the offer. Right now, they're offering up to a 30% bonus on your first deposit, and up to 35% if you use my code WAZOO at the top, along with an additional free $5 if you make a trade worth $100. That's a lot of free money. Check out SkinsMonkey today and use my code WAZOO. Thank you, SkinsMonkey. Now, let me put a warning because I know I will get comments about this. Can you replicate these strats beat for beat in a solo queue game? Hell no. But hopefully me explaining these professional protocols inspires the imagination and gives you ideas on how to more effectively take mid on Mirage, as well as how to counter these setups should you ever face them. Let's first explain what each of these pieces of utility does. The window smoke smokes window. The top mid smoke is known to prevent the CTs from being able to see the T's cross to mid boxes from the connector ledge, cat, and window. You can throw this smoke by standing to the left of the garbage can in T's spawn, aim at the top of this antenna, and do a standing left click throw. The smoke will fly through the air, bounce back on this small ledge, landing towards the T's. But you might be asking, why do you need the window smoke if you already have a top mid smoke? Firstly, the top mid smoke can easily be broken without a sound by a window player throwing an HE, allowing the CTs to get an angle on unsuspecting T's crossing. The window smoke doesn't necessarily prevent this, but it does make it more difficult. And it denies the window player from guarding their connector players while they peek into underpass, putting pressure on the entire CT mid hold. The CTs can still play fast into underpass, but they will usually not see anyone, but I'll explain why later. Now typically, the player with this spawn will throw an instant mid-window smoke, but if you want to throw both of these smokes yourself, hey WAZOO from the future here, I procrastinated on making this video for so long that Valve actually messed up the lineups for most jump throws. Don't worry, I already double checked the rest of the nades in this video, they're fine. Except for the window smoke that I was about to show you. If you want to throw the window smoke from the left of this trash can, where you throw the top mid smoke, you want to look at the bottom of the antenna, aim slightly left, and while holding D on your keyboard, jump throw. I actually learned this nade from some students that I taught at Gosu Academy, so thanks guys. But anyways, Modern WAZOO out now. The rest of the utility used on mid is pretty self-explanatory. The CTs will throw some kind of mid boxes molly to prevent the T's from crossing into mid boxes early. The T's will throw a bottom connector molly to prevent the CTs from pushing top mid or underpass, and the CTs will counter by throwing a smoke bottom connector to reopen their options for aggression. Sometimes the T's will nade stack connector, and other times the CTs will break the window smoke to get an op shot or some information, but those are less common. However, even though all of this utility is being used, the T's and CTs usually do not push mid immediately, because even if the T's were mollied off from top boxes, the CTs will spam the top mid smoke, damaging the T's if they cross. This causes the T's to back up and play defensively. So that means the CTs should be able to get free mid control, right? Well, no. While they do have a bit of early round control, they can't really push up to top mid because the T's that have backed up will be watching their push, and they can't exactly stay because the T's holding mid can spam flashes and easily retake. So that really only leaves one option for the CTs to aggress, underpass. But as I mentioned earlier, fast T underpass pushes are usually not played in this setup specifically because of this threat, so the CTs almost always leave empty-handed if they do peek underpass. Because of these factors, it generally isn't worth it for the CTs to try to aggress into mid, and with both teams playing defensively, mid is left in a stalemate for the first 10 to 20 seconds of the round. So why do professional teams play this setup? Wouldn't it be more worth it to use your utility to guarantee controlled space? Theoretically, yes. If you could use 2 smokes, molly, and flashes to guarantee mid control, then that would be better. But I haven't been completely honest. The reason why the top mid smoke is so powerful is not just because it denies CT aggression, but because it denies CT's easy information. Because the connector CT cannot see who crosses into mid boxes, their vision into bottom mid is smoked off to counter the molly, and because the CTs get punished for getting aggressive, it's incredibly hard to tell what the Ts are planning. Are 4 Ts crawling along the left wall for a connector push? Are there 2 players underpass boosting into window? Are there even any Ts in mid at all? It's hard to tell. And considering that Mirage is famously known for team strategies living and dying by mid control, this setup puts the CTs in a very uncomfortable position. But this is a default setup, so what are the Ts usually doing? This Mirage setup is a 2-2-1. 2 players working towards the site the Ts want to end on, 2 players defending mid, and 1 lurker on the opposite site. 2 players may seem too few to hold mid, especially if you are accustomed to a 1-3-1 or 4 mid setup. But firstly, I may have been underselling just how scared the CTs are to push mid. Here's Flamesy, Rops, and Apex working together to clear top mid. If Rops and Flamesy went all the way through, they would have easily traded out Wonderful on the solo hold, taking down Navi's Opper, but they back up, which was the right move as Ima and JL would have flanked them from underpass. So CTs are usually not delving a whole lot of extra resources to holding mid, and even if they do, this top mid smoke has a few more tricks. Although the mid boxes are almost always mollied, there is enough of a gap between the boxes and the smoke to create a new angle for the Ts to push through onto mid ramp, and there's nothing really stopping you from pushing through the smoke and getting early cat aggression. Still don't believe that's enough? Here's Donk, the most mechanically gifted player in CS2, trying to hard push mid against Mouse. He makes the cat jump, he gets blinded twice, and double swung by Brolin and Zershin in an impossible duel. Shiro in window is not much help since he smoked off, and if the Mouse players decide to molly bottom connector, they would have delayed a connector trade, which Spirit doesn't have in this round anyways. Here's Navi pushing Alexi B and Ima early through the top mid smoke, where they are uncontested, applying a ton of pressure on the Mongolz defense from mid, and with a few shots from Bit and Palace, and a push from Blitz through apartments, the Mongols scramble to rotate towards A, where Navi flips the script and work B, where they get a pick onto Blitz in mid, before Alexi B's genius strikes with a double fake, and Navi end A again. And if you want to be more aggressive, you could throw a variation of the top mid smoke by aiming at the top right of the antenna when standing next to the garbage can, and do a standing left click throw. The smoke will land a little bit deeper, allowing you to be shielded more when you aggress down cat, at the cost of no longer having the connector protection when you cross mid. The Mongols love to use this variation, applying more pressure on the connector player to stay back and watch out for the double swing. And there's nothing wrong with pushing 3 or 4 players through mid consistently. Vitality exploits this all the time since the CTs are usually not contesting mid, and with 1 smoke to re-smoke window, 1 smoke to block connector, and the Ts can easily split onto either site. And that's the real power of this setup. This setup, especially the 2-2-1 variation, not only allows the Ts to take mid relatively safely, but also allows them to easily convert into a site push on either side of the map, solving the age-old problem of getting stuck in mid after you expended all of your resources getting there. Smokes last for 22 seconds in Counter-Strike 2, and while that is not necessarily a long time, it is long enough to verify that the CTs are not pushing any lane of the map, and to rotate and set up for a site hit. Let's start with the A-site conversion. The A-site rotation is a little bit harder to facilitate since the rotation is extremely long, especially if you shift walk to be silent. So usually teams will have to leave mid with around 8 seconds left on the smokes, and leave their B player to continue faking mid and eventually lurk to cut off the rotations, allowing the 4 other Ts to push A. And this is all well and good, but because the aforementioned long rotates through spawn, many teams also elect to fake the default 2-2-1 and instead play 4 towards A with a lurker mid to facilitate the utility trade and ultimately sell the fake. Now, in either setup, because there is so much mid pressure, you don't need to throw the CT smoke since, chances are, the upper is in connector, and the threat of a B hit is so great that teams would rather put 2 players with faster rotations through jungle than having a more stable hold on A. So most teams on the T side would rather choose to spend their first 2 smokes on the default setup, 2 smokes to block off connector stairs, but save the last smoke for the post plant. The B site conversion has 3 main protocols, and is generally easier because the mid players have a much shorter path to rotate, but also because the B site only needs 1 smoke, the market smoke, so the Ts have 1 extra smoke to play with in the post plant or for the mid hit. The more common of the 2 B conversions is the mid split, where after the mid smokes fade, window is re-smoked, some kind of connector smoke is thrown, whether that be the bottom connector or top connector variation, and the Ts can start scaling up cat. The A lurker, at this point, will either join the cat or apartments push, and sometimes the mid player will walk back through underpass into apartments to strengthen the apartments hit, but regardless, all 5 players can split the site. Now you may be wondering, couldn't the CTs just fight through mid if they see the connector smoke? And technically you're right. However, teams know this and will often fake this exact play and go A as mentioned before. If the CTs want to retake mid, it's going to take an incredible amount of resources that could go into stopping an A hit. Or the Ts will actually push up through connector with the smoke, so if the CTs break the smoke, they will just get gunned down brutally. And the cat player isn't exactly willing to get swamped by 3 or more people, so they have to play back. The second, harder, but generally safer way to split B is having one of your B players rotate down into underpass, your lurker and one of your mid players rotate into apartments, and once the mid smokes fade, the underpass player will throw a smoke into window while the mid player throws a smoke into connector. 1 flash is thrown into cat by the top mid player as the underpass player starts slowly crawling up into top mid. This player will throw a molly deep into cat, allowing the top mid player to fully scale. And this is when the rush starts. All at the same time, a flash is thrown into ladder and the top mid player will follow up. One of the apartments players will throw a market smoke and another will throw a van molly, initiating the site hit and essentially giving the CTs absolutely no time to rotate. And if you think that this is just a Navi specific strat, here are the Mongolz doing the same exact thing to Faze. If that's too much for you, just push 4 apartments with a mid lurker. It doesn't have to be that deep. So this opening setup is incredibly versatile, safe, and effective for the Ts. So how are the CTs even supposed to counter it? The answer is extremely careful and smart rotations. Nah, just stack the sites. While effective, the setup is pretty expensive for the Ts. They need to use 2 smokes, a molly, and most importantly, a whole lot of their time. Although the Ts can convert the setup towards the sites, they can't really do a site fake. So once the Ts start committing to a site, there's really no going back, except for Alexi B shenanigans, but excluding that, this means that if the CTs get any amount of information after the smokes fade in mid, there is a pretty good chance that they can deduce exactly what the Ts are up to. A blanket counter to this setup is by reinforcing the sites and playing extremely defensively, essentially playing a 1-2-2 setup where the cat player is going to be much more involved in defending B and the 2 A-leaning mid-rotators are ready to fight back onto A with their anchor. As soon as any site hit is initiated, the CTs can quickly convert into a site stack, making the site hit a full-on brawl. The second way that you can counter the mid-smokes is by carefully timing your mid-aggression. Here's Zywoo dunking on Spinks with no consequences. When the Ts rush the mid-smoke, they usually do it as soon as they possibly can, so obviously don't peek mid while they're doing this. If they are defaulting, they're going to be waiting away from the smoke to not get spammed out, before flashing out and retaking mid. That leaves a brief window from when the smokes land to when the CTs stop spamming mid, where the CTs can aggress into underpass or extend a little bit into mid and maybe catch anyone who is hovering around the top mid smoke. You can combine this with a snack smoke, or if you're an old Hawker viewer, an Astralis smoke, to deny the T's vision onto top mid, allowing you to aggress past their defensive setup. You can throw the snack smoke from CT spawn by standing along this bezel, aim at the bottom right of the bottom left window here, and W tap jump throw. This is a great way to force the T's to make a decision mid, but you can't stay too long, otherwise you're going to eat flashes, potentially get pinched, or the T's will break the smoke and gun you down. Honestly, it's not worth pushing while the smokes are up, and even if the smokes are down, that usually means that the T's have control of mid or on their way to hit a site. So just play the passive 1-2-2 and you'll probably be fine. After all, it's the most commonly used setup by the CTs during the Austin Major, and they won half their rounds, so it's good enough. And that's all I have for you guys today, and let me know in the comment section down below if I missed anything, and if you enjoyed the video, consider leaving a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out. Other than that, I'll see you guys very soon.